let's talk about legalism. So how do you get away from legalism and make sure you're doing it right? Well, let's just explain what legalism is.
Mm.
If anyone wants to jump in.
I think legalism focuses on obligation, and I think it puts people into a place of feeling restricted rather than feeling free. Ultimately, God has his statutes, like there is his commands. There is those things. I think the word legalism has also been really taken negatively,
Hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
it's not legalistic in a sense of now I have all these rules and regulations that I have to really squeeze into, but I have these boundaries that I have to um, keep in mind. I have these
Yeah.
boundaries that keep me in a safe place, and those boundaries are living a life of love. And if you're not
Yeah.
living in that, then you're not living. Then you are now living out of God. And then
Yeah.
if you're living out of God, then God is not abiding in you. And if God's not abiding in you, then did you really fully receive Christ in the first place? Because when you fully receive Him, remember how we're talking about Lord. It's not a word that we take lightly. It's when I am now giving my life to you. I am now submitting my life to you. And
Mm.
God does not is not to be an accessory to your life. And so
Yeah.
those who really understand the weightiness behind that, that's where I believe true salvation is then met. Some people do receive true salvation at that point, but then some people also draw away from that. And so, yeah, God makes it simple that we just focus on loving God and loving people. And in
Yeah.
terms of legalism, that's the only legal requirement he's required of us, and he's
Yeah.
given us
That's right.
Jesus to
Mm.
fulfill that. You
That's
know,
right.
Mm.
he he
Yeah.
uh he had the 10 commandments, but then he said ultimately it's just these two commandments. It's just these two things that I'm asking you to fulfill. And he
Yeah.
made that so simple. The Great Commission's there. Out of those commandments, it is a practical way to fulfill those commandments. And
Mm.
you can see
Mm.
it throughout the word. He teaches us how to fulfill those commandments. And
Yeah.
if you're not living in that, then you're not living in God.
Yeah.
Mm.
What are your thoughts, Jane?
I think to to describe anyone as legalistic, or yeah, it's probably take it in a negative sense, right? If a person were to use the law, or
Mm.
use the Bible in order to you know condemn someone, or
Mm.
just tell
Mm.
them straight up you're wrong, without um you know uh on Wednesday night we were talking about seeking to restore. If you're going to
Yeah.
correct someone, always
Yeah.
restore.
Yeah.
Do it in all gentleness and in humility, right? So
Yeah.
um and I believe this term, uh in the negative context, yeah, it has a negative connotation to it,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because you know we've been we've been set free from the sin of the law of sin and death.
Yeah.
And um but uh I what I really think about it is because when I've heard of it in the past, I think, oh, the Pharisees in the New
Yeah.
Testament, very uh they're just like telling off Jesus all the time. You shouldn't be doing this. Like,
Mm.
Mm.
this is what the
Mm.
law says. um
Mm.
Instead of it's always leading to you're wrong, instead of, hey, this is what we can do to,
Mm.
this is a better way. Or um always out to condemn rather than come up with a solution. How to,
Yeah.
let's, this is the right way to do it, let's do it this way, and
Yeah.
encouragement to do it that way. But that kind of legalism, it doesn't help anyone really. It pushes people away,
Yeah.
to be honest. um so those are my thoughts on
Yeah.
legalism. Mm.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good. My take on legalism is yeah. So the Pharisees, the way they did it, so they abided by every law, every bit of the law, and
Mm.
this is the verse that I wanted to bring up. So Ephesians 2:8. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith.
Mm.
And this not of
Mm.
yourselves, but it is a gift of God, not by
Mm.
works, so that no one can boast.
Mm.
And you brought up the Pharisees. The way I see legalism is it's 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 backwards. It's like it's that verse but backwards. So those guys are boasting
Mm.
because of their works,
Mm.
because
Yep.
Yeah.
they believe that they are holy, holier than thou, because of
Mm.
what they are doing. And the way to get out of that is just reversing that. We are saved by grace. You have been
Yep.
saved through faith. So
Mm.
it's faith is the doorway into grace, and what we've talked about before, grace is the thing that enables you to do the work. Right.
Mm.
So the Pharisees, they did work equals boast, but then God's way is by faith you enter into grace, and grace enables you to do the work.
Yep.
So all the
Mm.
stuff that we've been talking about, how we're supposed to crucify the flesh, how we're supposed to put off and put on the new man, how we're supposed to be a new creation, how we're supposed to put on what the Bible says, it's a mirror, all that stuff, how we're supposed to be Christian, how we're supposed to fulfill what God's purpose is in our life, how we're accountable for that. All of that stuff is impossible for us to do in our own
Mm.
strength.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
if you fail in one little thing of the law, you are guilty of the whole law.
Yep.
far,
Yeah. Yeah.
like far out. But that verse, and also Philippians 2:13, it talks about how it's God who's working in you in order
Mm.
to do all that stuff, in order to fulfill it. So it always comes back to what we've been talking about with once saved always saved. We need to know God, and
Mm.
that's where all the magic happens. That's when everything aligns.
Mm.
So you got to seek. There's a Yes. So you've got to seek God in your private time, like
Yep.
when no one
Mm.
else is looking. When when no one's looking, that's when you know it's genuine.
Mm.
You are seeking God with all your heart, mind,
Yeah.
soul, body, and
Mm.
then you shall find Him. And then you surrender to Him, and then by faith you enter into grace, and then by grace you fulfill what he needs from you, what's the word? What he needs from you. There's another word, but that's all right.
Mm.
Yeah.